The last few weeks we have spent talking about apology language and stress language. And before that, we did the core desire, core sin struggle, and core fear. And now it's time to head into love languages. And I think that most of us have a general understanding of what the love languages are. I wonder if we have a good understanding of how to love our kids to their love languages. And so I want to talk about that, just give you some helpful tips today. And one of the things that I want to point out first is that before the age of 5, children want to experience love in all 5 ways. And so kind of takes the pressure off a little bit because they just want to be loved in whatever way we want to love them. And then once they're 5, you'll be able to start seeing patterns. That's what I want to help you see today. So, of course, the first love language is words of affirmation. This is one of the easiest ones to notice because your child will be asking you for compliments. One of the biggest telltale signs is when you compliment another child and the other one says, and me too, right? I'm amazing at this too. Or didn't you love this about me? And I think that a lot of times the love language of the parent kind of rubs off on the love language of the child because that is how we best love. And so her love language was words of affirmation. And I think all 3 of her children have that as one of our 2 primary love languages. So keep that in mind too, that you really, really impact this, probably more so than some of the other things. So words of affirmation for a kid, so just a couple of tips, is that they oftentimes will love to be called like a special nickname. If words of affirmation is their love language. And they love to overhear you speak highly about them. So when dad comes home from work or when you get home from work or whatever it is, maybe it's not dad, but maybe like your mom is coming over for a little while, try to kind of brag on your child to that person who's coming over. Guess what so-and-so did? Isn't that amazing? And you will see them like perk up and be excited to hear about it. Of course, leaving little love notes on their nightstand means the world to them. Acts of service, oftentimes a child who needs acts of service wants to be in the mix with you. And so whether that's doing a special project that you're doing, I mean, there's usually one child who wants to go out in the yard with dad and hang out, or there's one child that's kind of eagerly like wanting to help you cook. That's typically a sign that you're going to have a child who loves acts of service. Those children love it when you help them pick out an outfit. In fact, those children probably want to lay out the outfit ahead of time, and you can affirm that outfit choice as well. If your children has a chore list that they normally do, you could do it for them. Not all the time, but like on a special Saturday, just say like, I already did that for you, and they'll really light up. Acts of service, kids love extra time at night to be tucked in and really are bummed when they miss out on it. Of course, that kind of bleeds into the next one, which is quality time. And sometimes in children and in adults, it's hard to know, like, are you acts of service? Or are you just wanting me to hang out with you right now? And one of the biggest differences is the full undivided attention. So if somebody loves quality time, they might not necessarily want to cook as much as they want to maybe eat it with you, or as much as they just want to sit with you and snuggle or read a book. And so that's like the big differentiation there, is quality time is typically more still and more present than acts of service time is. But they do kind of bleed into each other quite a lot. So the biggest thing with quality time, if you notice that your child is needing that, and sometimes they'll just ask, like, I'll get a note, Mommy, can I hang out with you? Mommy, can you come to my room? And that's how I notice that is quality time, that they're needing quality time, is to stop and make sure that you're also giving them eye contact in those situations. One of the things that she taught me early on in my motherhood was make sure that you are giving your child eye contact in positive situations, because so often as parents, we're like, look at me, right? Like when they're in trouble, look at me in the eyes, right? Like you want them to hear you. Make sure that they hear you on a positive note 1,000 times more than they hear you on that negative note. And so one of the things that I do intentionally, I try each day, but none of us do everything every day, And so every week I'll try to look them and kind of grab them on the shoulders and say, depending on what their love language is, like, I'm so proud of you, or just pick out something that they did that week. I love you so much, or that kind of thing. So the gifts is hard for me. I'm not naturally a gift giver. And so if your child has a love language that you're not used to, that might be kind of hard for you. But the biggest thing with gifts is to leave little surprises. So a little surprise on their nightstand, a little surprise in their shoe. I mean, there's just so many like little trinkets that you could leave around for them. One of the things that I did for one of my children whose love languages is gifts is I got him a special shelf for him to put all of his prized possessions on. And he was thrilled and proceeded to spend 2 hours cleaning his room because he was so thrilled with the ability to showcase his things, which I just, is hard for me. A treasure chest is going to be really great if you keep that in the house. I mean, like when they go to the dentist and they get a treasure chest, some of your kids light up more than others do. That might be your gifts love language, kid. And then the last thing with the gifts is a scavenger hunt that could be really good to love that type of child. And then the fifth one is physical touch. Typically that's going to come with the snuggling. One of the things that I learned years ago was don't pull away from a hug. Let the child pull away from the hug. And whoa, I have one child who hugs me 4 minutes long. I mean, we will stand there, like my back will hurt. We're standing there hugging, and it's just funny. So try that with your child, is let them pull back from the hug and instead of you being done, and see how that works. Children with physical touch love like group hugs. Maybe they love like a group chant. We love to say Team Weiss. And so anytime we're headed out on a vacation or, just having expectations for the kids, we'll put our hands in the middle and do a Team Weiss. Sometimes they love for their hair to be touched. A lot of times they're asking for like back rubs or back scratches, or one of my kids set up a massage business in his room and wanted us all to if that doesn't scream, I just want to touch you, I don't know what does. So there's so many fun opportunities there. And so my challenge to you is to start trying out some of these ideas that I just gave you with your kids and just notice how they light up.
Very nice. Okay, so the two mantras or little nuggets that I'm going to give you today, one of them is this idea that whoever starts it finishes it. So avoid the idea that, wait till your father comes home and then there's going to be discipline doled out for whatever it was. You can defer if that's what you need to do, but then don't handle it at all. Just roll your eyes and move on, and don't set the child up to fear, that I'm going to get this discipline when my dad gets home. And I think the other thing that's hard about that is when I used to come home from work at 8:00 at night, the last thing I wanted to do was discipline my child because I missed them and I wanted to just be with them. And so that's the other thing. I think that you're setting up your husband in some ways for failure if you have to deal with it. So if your child is doing something and you don't either have the time or the energy or the brain space or the wherewithal to handle it, you can say like, I'm just not going to handle this right now. What just happened is not okay, but we're going to deal with it later. And then at least it's not, if you do defer, I mean, maybe you go with your husband in that case and talk about whatever it was. If we walked in and there was discipline going on in the midst of it, especially like when I came home from work at 8:00, if my husband was in the midst of doing something, I just didn't go in that room because, I didn't want to sabotage what he was doing, but I also didn't want to really get involved, and I didn't know the whole story. I hadn't been there. I'm only seeing part of it. Now, I say this assuming that there's not abuse going on in the home. I think if there's abuse going on, you need to intervene. And I'm not suggesting that you turn the other, look away from that. I'm saying if the discipline is within the realm of normal, then I think that whoever starts it needs to finish it. And then the next one that I want to talk about is there's a little song that we used to sing. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Okay. But one of the advantages we have in being a Christian and being a follower of Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit is that we get to choose our joy. And I've said so many times when I've been in difficult situations, I'm not going to let this situation or this person or this whatever's going on steal my joy. My joy is not happiness. Happiness is, getting a good grade on a test or whatever. Joy is this idea that I'm glad to be alive, and there's an abiding depth to my contentment about having life and being grateful for my life. And so in the idea that the joy of the Lord is your strength, teach them to look for what they can be grateful for, even in difficult situations. Now, that does not mean that I want you to minimize when something hard happens. We talked about this earlier, I definitely want you to empathize. I want you to put your arm around them and say, oh, that must have really hurt. I want you to be present with them. I want you to listen to them. But ultimately, you've got to be able to move on to, but I'm not going to let this thing steal my joy. And so you've got to find that balance. I also think it's valuable to find that the thing that you can still have joy about, the thing that you can still be grateful for, because otherwise sometimes we can go into the pity party mode and woe is me, and there's a victim mentality in that, and the last thing I ever want any of my children to do is be victims. Now, sometimes we are victims, but we get to navigate that. We still usually have choices, even if somebody is doing something that has kind of created us to be in a situation where we're victims to that situation. And so find that balance with them. Really encourage them to believe that the joy of the Lord is their strength. It's a strength. And God loves them so much. And ultimately, you're going to figure out how to navigate whatever situation. And, that's saying that my mother used to always say, which is really true, this too shall pass. Most of the time, that's true. There are some really hard things like the death of a parent or something that's huge. And I'm not really talking about those huge things, although I do think that if you abide in your joy and your joy is yours and you own it, I even think that will sustain you through the really, really hard things. But I'm more talking about the day-to-day things that, really will not impact your life in any permanent way, that it's temporary. So, and then, so those are the two, my mantras are nuggets. And then moving into the loving motherhood, I just like the idea of being free enough some of the time to create small adventures. Trisha's talked about having, like if it's raining, having a picnic with a blanket on the floor in the living room. Or, she talked a little bit about having a treasure box, or, if you have time, doing a little scavenger hunt with your kids.
Even saying yes. The other day, I was making pancakes, and they said, "Can we make a giant one?" And just saying yes to that was an adventure in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly. So create small adventures. I also want you to be challenged to create large adventures. So go see other states. If you have time, like you have spring break, you don't necessarily have to go to Cabo. You can get in the car and go see something, a national park, or go to another state or something like that. I also really want to challenge those of you who are Christians to figure out how to get on the mission field, even if it's just for a week. I felt strongly that I could teach my kids about poverty all day long, but they really weren't going to understand it until they saw it. So we went on our first mission trip. Trisha was 14 and Tiffany was 7. She did incredibly well. And Trisha did really well too. And there were times we were in situations that were very uncomfortable, like there were bugs in our bed. And we had to, we just took all the all the sheets and everything and took them outside and shook them.
And then the centipedes started crawling up the walls.
Yeah. But it wasn't anything that was going to damage them long term. And so
I was damaged.
it was just something that we had to deal with. Another part of the Honduras trip was the shower. It was a hose and it would go through this coil and it would warm up the water a little. Now, it was hot there, so you didn't need real warm water. But it was just like, you know, we just take for granted, right, that you get in the shower and warm water comes out of the shower head. It's just little things like that. I think it was so important. And then the other thing about that trip that was so effective is that we went to these Feed the Hungry kitchens. So one of the things that the missionaries had done, and I'll tell you what, Honduras is a country that's in much better shape because of all the missionaries. They are doing incredible work there. This particular set of missionaries, they were just a couple that they went there and they lived there for 35 years and made enormous impact. Brought hundreds of thousands of people to Christ. It was just incredible. But they also were big into meeting their needs. And one of their needs was food. And so they created in these little villages Feed the Hungry kitchens. And these children, there were not enough bowls and forks for everybody. So half of them had to wait. And then we served them. And then we went and washed the bowls.
Hardly.
They
ate out of dirty bowls.
We just dipped them in soapy water. And then fed the other half. And the half that didn't get to eat right away, they were so patient. They had learned that they were going to get fed. They just needed to sit there. It was just this incredible thing of, look at their ability to be patient. It was startling to me, and I know that it impacted our kids. So those are the kinds of things that I really want to encourage you to expand your horizons if you can. If you're involved in a church that has missions trips and you can send support letters, wherever. I mean, it doesn't have to be enormously expensive. I'm really thankful that we did those things, and we were really fortunate. Ron and I would get asked to speak in places all over the world, and so we would take our children. There was one time, Trisha was 19 at this point. We were in
Kazakhstan.
Yeah, and they ran the whole Vacation Bible School for 25 kids, and they kept bringing their friends, so there kept being more kids. They had one interpreter who kept leaving the room because he wanted to hear what we were saying. And they were with these kids for 2.5 hours. I mean, they just handled it. They managed it. They taught them little songs that didn't have a lot of words to them. It was just incredible to me that my kids at ages 12 through 19 could run a Vacation Bible School for these kids. So anyway, really encourage you to create small and large adventures. And then the other Loving Your Motherhood nugget that I want to give you is just this idea that embrace their friends. Try, if you can, to be at a house where they can gather. We had this bridge that Ron had built outside, and I know that hers, when they were in 6th grade, they would gather on that bridge quite a lot. Now, we had some competition. We had other families that wanted to be that house. So they did spend a lot of time at other people's houses. Maybe the house was a little cooler or the basement was a little nicer, whatever. That's okay too, but I wanted to make sure that my kids knew that they could bring their friends home, and that they could gather there, and that I wasn't gonna interrupt them or be in their face. So just try to create an environment where you get to know their friends. It'll really help you know what some of their influences are really well. All right.
See you next week.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Oh, no, we did that.
I did it again.
We did that.
Was that 20?